Okay, so we're going to talk about the October changes, put a little bit of context around why we've got this session arranged for this evening. We'll talk about and look at the Locum A Forms, the Locum B Forms, the particular element on PCSE Online where you record the contributions, and also just to highlight the employee contribution statement and what you can see on there. Hopefully, some of you, all of you, have at some point logged into PCSE Online, and you will see when you log in that you'll have a performer list button and you'll have a GP pensions button. When you click onto that GP pensions button, you will have a number of different buttons and options you can choose, and one of them is Locum Work. And not surprisingly, then you click the Locum Work button to start completing your Locum forms. So your Locum Form A income entry is the button that we start off with. Go to the Locum A form and we start to complete the details. So we begin with the financial year selection. So as we get into the territory of the 10-week rule, then we will normally be submitting and completing forms in the current year, but as I've said, you've still got the possibility of being able to submit forms from 30th of September or prior and up to that time. So it's possible that you could have a previous forms from earlier in the previous financial year, and then you are asked whether the form is for RMS, and what that is to indicate is whether the income is from appraisal work. So if it is from appraisal work, then you would select yes, and if it's not for appraisal work, if it's for practice work, then you would select no. And another helpful change that we've been waiting on, and we will now see also at the end of October, is that you will be able to submit your Locum forms online that do contain RMS work, and they will now be able to be approved by the RMS appraisal team. But when we select no, if it's practice work, then we need to enter the practice ODS code. Enter that practice ODS code, it will bring up the practice name, and then we'll complete the start and end date of the period of work into the fee in the fee earned box, and then we would move on down the form. So if you do make any mistakes, you'll see you've got a delete button there. You're able to delete that and start again if you put the wrong dates or wrong fee, etc. So there is that protection and ability to go back and correct. If you get to further down into towards the end of the year and you've got a 10-week period or more than 10 weeks since the engagement period that you're trying to enter, you will get this. Apologies, that's a little bit of a blurred message, that's a blurred screenshot, sorry, that we've captured there. You will get a message to tell you that the form it's exceeded the 10-week rule, that it's more than 10 weeks since the end of the period of engagement. But obviously, as you'll see how straightforward it is to go through, then your A forms, you'll be able to complete them in plenty of time. But there is that message just there in the system if in the event someone tries to enter a form that is actually more than 10 weeks past the end of the period of work or the period of engagement. But continuing with the Locum A form that's successfully entered, if we have the dates and the fees, and it will calculate the pensionable element of that fee, and the form will calculate the employer's contribution. We'll save that, and then we just tick to confirm the date, today's dates that you complete it will populate, and then you'll click to submit. What I should have said is at the beginning is that everything that I'm going to show you in terms of these screenshots is all from a test environment. So there might be some weird and wonderful names, weird and wonderful sort of amounts and things like that, and that you see on the screen purely because it's test data. So we've submitted our Form A. And what happens next is the practice that you've carried out the work for receives an immediate notification to tell them that they have a Locum form submitted. So there's an email sent to the users in the practice with a particular role that can approve Locum forms, and there's also a message in the message section of the PCSE online portal when that user or users log in. And we've just given you an example here on screen. Again, as I say, it's just a test form, so forget about the dates and the amounts, but it basically tells the practice user that Dr. X has submitted a Locum A form, gives the dates, gives the amounts, but then it gives them a button, a review button that they can click on, and they can click straight through to approve, or certainly to review that form, and they get the option to approve that or reject it. So if they note that someone has perhaps made a mistake with dates or even the fee, then they've got the ability to reject that, and you would get a notification back on that. You would be able to submit the correct form. Now, we've tried to look at ways to make the implementation of the 10-week rule as smooth as possible, on the basis that people haven't had to concern themselves about it for a long time, and the last time people had to think about it was way before the new system was introduced. So we've built in a reminder notification to the practice or practices that if there's a Locum A form that's been sent or submitted by a locum to them for review, for approval, if it hasn't been reviewed by the 8-week point, so 2 weeks before the 10 weeks would be up, so to speak, then they will receive an automated reminder to nudge them to do that, and that mentions that they need to do that for the locum to comply with the 10-week rule. So we've built that automated reminder in, and then when they have approved it or they've reviewed it, then as a PCSE online user, then as yourself as a locum would log in to PCSE online, you'll see you will also have a message button, and you'll be able to click onto that and see the notifications that you've got. So we've just again pasted in an example, which is where it would tell you that a form that you've submitted has been accepted. If the form has been rejected, then it will tell you it's been rejected, and the little free text box that the practice completes with the reason for rejection would also be, that information would be displayed. But if you've had an accepted form, then you can click view, and that will bring that form up automatically. But ultimately, you now know that you can sort out your Form B and get this submitted. So if you did click view, you can bring your form up. It would show it as status approved. When you submit the form, and if it's waiting for the practice to review it, then if you open the form up again, it would show status pending, but it's approved and it's ready to go. So I'm just going to move on now to an example of the Form B. And what is really helpful in the system is that all of the data that you've already entered for your Form A or multiple Form As is already there, and you're able to pull it through into your B form. Now, I just want to mention a little bit about this financial month label that we have on the PCSE system, because I do understand that it's caused a little bit of confusion for some people about what month do we actually mean here. So what the best way to think about this is the month that your employee contribution statement is going to update. So that's what you're looking to select here. So if in this example here, I had a Form A that we completed to say there was some work done from the 1st of October to the 4th of October. And, say come the end of October, I've been in holiday for the rest of the time, or I've just decided to submit this as a standalone form, or it was the only locum engagement that I did carry out. When I've come to complete the Form B, then if I select October, any eligible forms that can be included in that month, so if they've been approved and they're in that period, then we'll be able to see them displayed, and you can see you get the option to tick to include them. Now, the other thing that you will have to do is you can see that there's this non-appraisal claims label in this drop down. If someone does have a mixture of appraisal work and non-appraisal work, then they'll have the options to select. But for this particular test user, they're only doing practice work. This is just a single standalone for me for the test practice that's been set up. But we've got the details displayed here to tell us, and then we can include that form. And if you have multiple Form As, then they'll just be displayed one below the other, and you'll be able to then select them and they'll pull through into a single Form B. But it's also important just to stress that it is possible to submit multiple Form Bs for the same month. So if you've received payments at different times, etc., you don't have to wait for another payment to come through from a different practice, etc., before you submit your form. You can just flow through this admin as soon as you have received payments, as soon as you're ready to submit the B form. It's entirely up to whatever's easier for yourself, really. But obviously, if you submit it as soon as you've received payment, then you know that you'll be well within your 10 weeks if the payment has come through in a timely fashion. So as we carry on through the Form B, then when you go down to and scroll down the screen, you'll see that the income pulls onto the form. You then have to select the appropriate tier rate. So obviously, depending on the applicable tier rate for yourself, then you select that, and then you'll see that the system will populate contributions in terms of the employee contributions. The Form A had already stated the employers, and we get the total contributions as well. So Form B is pretty much complete, and we can then see that if we're ready to submit that Form B, but just to show you an example of what happens if you have submitted some Form A's, and again, don't pay any attention to the dates here because this has been mocked up from a test environment. Clearly, July and August, the 10-week rule wasn't applicable, so, and neither was it in March. So it's just for illustration purposes. But if, when it comes to completing the Locum B form, then there are A forms that have then passed their 10-week lifespan, if you like. It's more than 10 weeks since the end of the period of work. Then what you will see, instead of an option to pick and select or click on and select the form to pull it through to your B form, you'll see that that's disqualified. Now, obviously, with the ability to check on PCSE online, the status of your forms, etc., and these instant notifications that the practice gets and that you then get back when they have reviewed your Form A's, then you shouldn't get to this point because you'll have an easy way to get the form submitted on time. But we just wanted to show you what does happen if that scenario does occur. But if we go back to our Form B that we can submit, then once we've clicked submit onto that, we can go to what's called the Locum Listing button. So when we went to the Locum Work button at the very beginning of this demonstration or this walkthrough, then we saw that there was a Locum A Form button, a Locum B Form button, and there was this other button called Locum Listing. And that's where you'll find and be able to search for any forms that you have submitted or any forms that you have created and that are waiting for approval, etc. So in this example, I filtered it on Form B, and we've just used the submission dates. We've been working with a lot of test data over the past few days. So we've just searched for this form from this date for this particular user, and we can see that the form that we're looking at here is approved in his B form. So you can refer to that at any point, and everything that you see on screen that is the sort of blue colour is clickable. So that's a hyperlink through to the form itself if you needed to have a look at it or check it. So that gets you through to your form, or through to the end of the journey for the actual form. But we also need to record the payment that we're making and confirm that we're making a payment. So whilst on PCSE Online, there is another button in your GP pension section called recording income stream. Some of the terminology is wonderful, but that's you get used to it. So recording income stream has two options. So recording income stream itself, which is the one that we're going to go for, and there's also this receivables listing button that we'll come to a little bit later on. So when I click recording income stream, then what we're doing here is clicking to enter locum payment, and this form here that's on screen is produced, or what is presented to me. So if I've got more than one B form in flight, then when I have this form reference drop down, I'll have the options to select the separate forms. But I've selected my form, and it immediately then brings up the details of the form. So it tells me what the employee's contributions are, any other contributions if there were any relevant contributions, and what the employer's contributions are. And then this then is the total contributions that I'm going to make payment for. So I click backs, that amount will be displayed, and I then click save. And when I click save, then what you'll see is that this pink box appears, and this is where the sort code and account number for the NHS England bank account will appear. So whilst you're in the system, you will get the sort code and account number that you need to use to make your payment. So if you don't already have a note of those, you know you don't have to contact PCSE like you do when you submit the offline version. Then you have the information that you need right here. And then once you've clicked save, then you get to are you sure option in case you need to go back and change anything. So you can take your time, you don't have to worry. You get these confirm buttons in various places on PCSE Online, but I thought it was a useful example to show you because it's obviously an important step when you're confirming that you're making payment. And what you'll see is once you've clicked confirm, then below the pink box, you actually get the payment reference displayed. So just right down here underneath the pink box, it's your SD number, it's LOC for locum, and then we've got the month, and then we've got the year. But what we've had to do is with the generation of multiple B forms, what the system does is it generates these 3 characters at the end of the reference. So it might be 01, 02, etc. What the instructions will be clear to you in the guide is because, again, it's another thing I think that's caused a bit of confusion, and you can see easily why that is. The instructions will be to disregard these last 3 characters, and the reference that you use when you make your backs payment through your bank account to NHS England's bank account is the reference right up to the end of the year, so up to 2022. So we just ignored the last 3 characters that are generated. So that what you're seeing there is just from the start of the SD number up to the 2022 in this particular year. Obviously, once we get into 2023, then it will generate as 2023. So that takes you all the way through the process. You then, assuming you have made the payment, that's it done. And from a PCSE perspective, sorry, just to mention, if you did click on that Receivables Listing button that I mentioned was part of your recording income stream view, then you can click and search to see the forms that you've confirmed payment for. So that does allow you to see that, but you won't really need that button, but we wanted to just show you what it does do. So after that's happened, you've made the payment, then PCSE on a weekly basis receive a list of transactions that have been made to NHS England's bank account. And there's a cycle of work throughput that goes on where the transactions that are received are matched up to the forms that they refer to. So there isn't any need for you to be submitting anything through the Contact Us form if you've used this fully online process. And our pensions team will be, as we get more and more people using the online solution, then the first place they'll be checking for forms when we receive a payment is on the online solution. And that then is just a matter of them reconciling that payment to your form. And then after that's done, that's when your employee contribution statement would update the periods of time between the payment being submitted and then the form being fully processed or reconciled, should I say, and therefore your contribution statement being updated can be up to 4 or 5 weeks, depending on the payments that are coming in. That's the normal agreement that we have with NHS England. So it doesn't necessarily happen immediately in the same week, but it will happen within 4 or 5 weeks, that when you go to your employee contribution statement. So again, you're still logged into PCSE Online, you're still in that GP pensions button, but another option you've got is employee contribution statement. I hope everybody on the call has at some point looked at their employee contribution statement on PCSE Online, because that's what you can see what has been recorded up to date. And when you're logged in as a GP, you'll have your own details presented to you at the top of the screen, and then you've got some search options, and you can select on the financial year. We've selected locum earnings here because if I was looking for my locum forms to make sure, or looking to make sure my locum contributions have been updated, then I can filter it down on that. So if I've got other types of work, I don't need to see it all together, or I can leave it unfiltered and see it all together. If I work at a practice and I select salaried, then I can select I can select the practice if I'm salaried or work at more than one practice, and just then I click search, and all of the contributions that have been processed from the start of the year, so it would be from April 22, will be displayed here. If I want to look back at 2019-20's contributions or 2021, if I've got a type 2 form or whatever to complete, then I can see all of the contributions that have been processed. So that's the key to it, that the employee contribution statement is where you can see that the end stage of the process has been completed. Everything that you've done in PCSE Online, you'll have a view of, but your contribution statement is then updated when that final reconciliation step has taken place. And that really takes me to the end of the presentation. But we have got quite a few questions, I think, in the chat. So yeah, this is probably a common one. When you say September work, does that mean work done in September that may be paid in October? Work paid in September, some maybe from August, or the date in the form that the manager has signed that the pay will be paid may often be not done till later. And you know, I think it's a really good question in terms of that just illustrates the different interpretations around the dates, doesn't it? In a nutshell, really. When we say September work, it's work that you've carried out in September. So the work that's carried out in September all belongs on, if you like, version 1 of the Locum A and B form for 22-23. So that's there for work from April to September, and work from October onwards is in version 2. When you come to PCSE Online, you will enter it in the same way, and in the background, the system will know that there's one set of tier rates that are applicable up to the end of September for work carried out up to the end of September, and that there's a different set of tier rates that are applicable for work from the 1st of October onwards. But it doesn't matter if you're using the offline paper versions that are PDFs that you download from NHS Pensions. It doesn't matter what a manager might say about when a payment date is or anything like that. Your locum administration is all around the dates worked, if that makes sense. I've got a question about how we get PCSE Online access. So I think I've jumped straight into an assumption, which is probably unfounded, that everybody knows how to access PCSE Online. So that was probably a wrong assumption. As GPs, then as long as we've had an email address through your performer list record, you will have access to PCSE Online. Whether you've actually accessed it or not is maybe a different question. So you will be able to, when you go to the PCSE Online login page, if you're on the PCSE website, and I'll put the hyperlink in the chat, we'll send some stuff out to you all anyway so that we make it clear how you do access the system in the first place. But if you don't know what your password is, maybe you've logged in the past a long time ago, or you've never logged in, then we'll make sure that we send you instructions how to reset your password. It's really straightforward. When you go to that first login page, there's a little button or link anyway that says forgotten your details. You click on that and it tells you what to do, but we'll make sure we include instructions around that. How do we work out how much is pensionable income we will have? So if we're talking about annual income, then yes, you've suggested would we recommend an accountant, then yes, you're looking at, there obviously are specialist accountants that support the GP community, but in terms of that 90% element on a locum form, then the system automatically calculates that. Okay, so we've got a colleague who's got a lot of questions about pensions themselves. So saying that the session was billed as being about pensions and the changes, and not just about how to complete PCSE Online. So We did target the session on focusing how to complete things on PCSE Online because it has been built to make it easier. But if you have got specific questions about the changes that I haven't covered yet, then please do put them in the chat. More than happy to answer them now, and any that we don't get to, as I say, we'll go through all of the questions and make sure that FAQs that we issue after the session later on in the week cover off all the points that colleagues are raising, because there's a lot of questions. We've got someone asking if they can keep using the inquiries page, so the contact us form, then yes, you can. It's not mandatory to use the PCSE online version. I hope it didn't look complicated. There's not very much that you need to do. It's you fill the forms in the same way as you fill your paper forms in, but you don't need to log into that contact us thing and say what your details are and attach your thing and upload it, etc. It's calculating as it goes for you. So I really would encourage you to give it a try, but absolutely it's not mandatory. So you do still have that option to carry on as you have been. Some practices don't pay within 10 weeks. How do we submit late forms? So the practices have all been advised that the 10-week rule is being reinstated and they will have to make sure that you can comply with that. If there's any individual issues, then that will need to go to the local commissioner, but the practices are very aware that this is something that they need to make sure that you're able to comply with. The ODS code, here's a good question, because again, it's probably another piece of terminology that I've jumped to an assumption that people would know about, and really there'd be no reason for people to know about it if you're working a clinical role. So the ODS code, NHS Digital issue ODS codes for all premises that provide NHS services and for other types of premises actually. So each practice has an ODS code. It's not you yourself. Somebody's asked if each GP has an ODS code, so it's the practice ODS codes. There is a lookup portal that you can put details into the NHS Digital Hub, but my advice would be to ask the practice manager or one of the practice administrators if you don't know what it is. They will know or will be able to find out for you. And once you know what it is, it's the same all the time if you work for that practice. So just make sure that you check with the practice. Bottlenecks, not every practice potentially will do this. So all practices have access to PCSE Online. They all use it to access their contractual payment statements and other types of statements. So they very regularly use PCSE Online. Absolutely understand that they're not necessarily engaging with locum approval steps at the moment. Wouldn't have any need to if they didn't have locum submitting forms on the system. We did run a session for practice managers or administrators with that responsibility this morning, and we've recorded that. We'll be sharing that, and we'll be using different forums. So, through commissioners and trying to send communications out through different methods so that to make sure that all the practices understand around the importance of the 10 weeks and the timely payments. So back to a comment that somebody made earlier, and also that they can't be the bottleneck, but also how straightforward it is for them to use the solution when locums that they engage are using it. So there's some questions about getting your income right and tier rates and making sure you apply, etc. So the rules around the pensions and the guidance around those rules sit with NHS Pensions themselves. They've got lots of really useful resources on their website, and they do run dedicated sessions at certain times in the year for different types of practitioners. So, obviously sometimes for people who do locum work, so look out for those. But if you go to the NHS Pensions website, and we'll include the relevant links in the guidance that we send out, then those questions really sort of sit more appropriately with them. PCSE are responsible, for administering the forms that you submit, and the processing the payments that you submit, but obviously the rules around all of that are not in PCSE's sort of control. I think we've got a comment from someone that maybe less than half the practices they work for use PCSE Online. I'd be really, really interested to see how they're accessing their statements and things like that then. We certainly have practice users registered at the very vast majority of practices, but as I said earlier, there's probably not all that many of them who've engaged so far with the locum approval step, because there's probably only about 15% of locums who are using the online solution at the moment. But as I said, we do think that being able to get visibility of everything you've submitted and clearly track things through is straightforward, and that's why we encourage people to use it. Certainly the traditional route still exists, as we've already mentioned. The new B form states date pay received, and this is the point about the payments and why we're capturing certain dates, but we do just follow the forms that are issued by NHS Pensions in terms of questions about can we pension work in advance and all of that side of things. That really is more related to the pension rules, and I've got to be really careful that PCSE are not trying to advise on things that PCSE are not supposed to advise on, so I hope that's kind of understood. Somebody pointing out that historically they've counted date as per date pay received and 10 weeks from then, but as I say, realistically the 10-week rule is what's set by NHS Pensions based on DHSC and not within our gift to control it. Is ODS code the same as the EA code? So hopefully what I've said earlier about ODS codes explained that it's not, but that is a different code. The Employing Authority code is held at NHS Pensions. The ODS code, as I say, the practice will have that. There's a scenario here about I've already submitted NB forms for September, but was going to add 30th of September to October. What do I do now? So I've already used my September code on the inquiries form. So you can just submit another B form and use the same BACS reference or that you've to submit that so that it's clear that it's a September form. What is the employer's contribution? So again, the explanation of the rules around that would be best found from the NHS Pensions website in terms of how that is all set out, but it's calculated at the same rate for all the forms. And same again when it comes to what tier to choose when someone starts locuming, then all you can do is estimate and make adjustments later on in the year if you need to. I think there's a colleague who's got the opposite, so maybe started on a higher tier because they were expecting to do more work and have ended up not working as much. Reduce that down. If a practice pays late, so I think we've tried to address that. We're obviously going to try and avoid all of that by working on the communications through various partners to try and make sure practices are all fully aware. If there are any circumstances where it's a delay at the practice that has held up your ability to pension your locum income, then that is something that would need to be raised with the local commissioners. But as I say, hopefully everything that we'll do to raise awareness will mean that that's not something that happens to folk on a anywhere near regular basis. Someone asking about a telephone number. We do have the customer service centre and you can call them. It is with pensions queries, it's usually much better to use the contact us form and submit the detail of the query, because then that can be targeted to the pensions query team rather than the regular customer service centre. But you can call the PCSE customer service centre as an alternative. So I think some folks are having discussions about annualisation, and I know that NHS Pensions have got some guidance on their website and in fact some guidance attached to the forms around that. Someone's asked why we didn't contact you about this before the end of September. So we did send out quite a few notices in our practice bulletins, GP practice, GP community bulletins. These changes, as we said, are obviously changes that NHS Pensions have had to announce on the back of what Department of Health and Social Care have decided. So they would control the messaging around that, but we as PCSE have tried to make sure that we help raise awareness as well. And these specific communications that we've been sending out now are all about how these changes will be implemented from a systems perspective. But as I say, just to reiterate, in case anybody joined late, work up until the end of September, work that you've carried out up until the end of September, the 10-week rule doesn't apply to that. So if anybody was concerned that they've got some administration to do for earlier on in the year or even from last year, then the fact that the 10-week rule applies from October doesn't cause you any problems with that. You can still take your time to work through that. Some good advice about the National Association of Sessional GPs, which is a body that we've engaged with through PCSE2 and obviously the BMA. Do we still have to do type 2 forms? Joanna, unfortunately, yes. So type 2 forms for anybody who does type 2 work, so salaried, if you do any solo work, you need to complete a type 2. If you only do locum work, but if you only do locum work, you don't need to complete a type 2 form, but if you have other types of work, then you do. Someone has said that they were salaried for 5 years but didn't know about type 2 forms. You need to complete the type 2 for all of the work that you've done. Yes, your payments have been made, but your records get updated once the type 2 forms have been reconciled. NHS pensions system, and lots of people might know this already, but some may not, it updates sequentially. So if in the example here where someone has 5 years of forms, then the best thing to do is to get them completed and submitted in order. So if it goes back to 2015, 16 or whatever year that will be, because as they're processed, then they can be processed on PCSE online, so the reconciliation is done. But in terms of the pensions online system, then it updates sequentially. So if for any reason someone has a form for a particular year, say 2017-18, that hasn't been reconciled because of an issue or for whatever reason, even if the 18-19, 19-20 type 2 forms have been submitted and processed, that missing year will stop the subsequent years from being updated. So once that missing year is processed and updated on pensions online, then those other years can be updated. But it is a real source of frustration for people. So it's just bearing that in mind. So if you have got any years that you know are outstanding, then if you are a type 2 GP, then the advice is to get those missing years submitted and any queries around reconciling sorted out, and then you will be able to have your NHS pensions records up to date. There's 1 or 2 questions about appraisal work, so we're going to make sure that we send some guidance on the appraisal side of things because people haven't been able to use the system before for those forms particularly. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and then for all your inputs. We've had an excellent engagement really with a huge amount of questions there. Thanks to the comms team who've supported in the background from PCSE and to Janet from NHS England for supporting and answering your questions too. So thanks very much. Have a good evening and I hope that you get a good experience with PCSE online. Thank you.